The shuttle landed on Prime with a soft hum. The doors opened slowly, and warm golden light poured inside. Vance took a deep breath and stepped out onto alien ground for the first time in her life. She was 17 years old. She had dark hair tied back in a simple knot. Her eyes were like storm clouds over the mountains where she grew up. She was not tall. She was not impressive to look at. She had no claws, no fangs, no armor on her skin. She looked to everyone watching like something that could break very easily. The Galactic Union Military Academy stood before her. It was a massive building made of white stone and blue metal. Towers reached up toward the purple sky. Hundreds of windows reflected the light of the twin suns. This was where the best soldiers in the galaxy learned to fight. This was where the children of powerful families came to prove themselves. And now, for the first time in history, a human had been accepted. Walked toward the main entrance. She could feel eyes on her from every direction. Cadets of many different species stood in groups, watching her pass. She saw tall beings with scales that shimmered like jewels. She saw short creatures with too many arms. She saw things that floated instead of walked and things that seemed to be made of living shadow. All of them stared at her with the same expression. Curiosity mixed with something else, something like pity. She understood why. In the galaxy, Earth was known as it was a planet where everything wanted to kill you. The gravity was heavy. The weather was violent. The animals were savage. The plants were poisonous. Even the bacteria could destroy you from the inside. Most species looked at Earth and wondered how anything could survive there at all. And then they looked at humans and saw soft skin and dull teeth and fragile bones. They saw creatures that needed to sleep every single day. They saw beings that could die from a simple fall. They did not understand how such weak things could come from such a deadly place. Knew the truth, of course, but she had learned long ago that some lessons could only be taught through experience. The main hall was enormous. Thousands of cadets stood in neat rows, wearing uniforms of silver and black. At the front of the hall, on a raised platform, stood the commandant. His name was L, and he was 8 feet tall with scales that changed color as he moved. His eyes were golden and very old. He had been running this academy for over 200 years. "Attention," he said. His voice was deep and filled the entire hall without effort. "Today we welcome a new cadet. She represents a new program. For the first time, the Galactic Union has decided to integrate species into our military forces. Cadet Vance of Earth will be joining the third-year class. You will treat her as you would treat any fellow cadet." A ripple of sound moved through the crowd. It was not quite laughter, but it was close. Stood perfectly still and let it wash over her. In the third row, a cadet leaned toward his friends and spoke in a voice that was meant to be heard. "They sent us their young. Perhaps Earth had nothing better to offer." His name was, learned this later, but she remembered his face immediately. He was a species that evolved on a gentle world where the sun was always mild and the water was always clean. His body was made of living crystal. He was beautiful in a cold, sharp way. Light passed through him and came out in rainbows. His edges looked like they could cut through steel. He was also the son of one of the wealthiest families in the Union. He had never been told no. He had never been afraid. He had never met anything that could hurt him. Looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then she looked away and walked toward her assigned quarters. Her footsteps made no sound on the polished floor. Several cadets noticed this and felt uncomfortable, though they could not say why. Her room was small but clean. A bed, a desk, a window that looked out over the training grounds. She set down her single bag of belongings and stood at the window for a long time, watching. Down below, cadets practiced combat in pairs. She studied their movements. She memorized their techniques. She noted which species were fast and which were strong. She identified the ones who had real skill and the ones who only had natural advantages. She watched win 3 matches in a row against opponents who should have challenged him. They did not challenge him. They were afraid of his family name. When the suns began to set, sat down at her desk and opened her. She accessed the Academy's public records and began to read. Combat tournament results, academic rankings, disciplinary reports. She read for 3 hours without stopping. Then she began to plan. There was a knock at her door late that night. She opened it to find a cadet standing outside. Were soft, gentle creatures with large eyes and kind faces. This one looked nervous. "I am Specialist Cadet," she said. "I wanted to welcome you and to warn you." Tilted her head slightly. "Warn me about what?" "He has decided you are an easy target. He does this to every new cadet who seems weak. He will make your life very difficult." Wrung her 4 hands together. "I am sorry. There is nothing anyone can do. His family is too powerful." Considered this for a moment. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, but something about it made take a step backward. "Thank you for the warning," said. "That was kind of you. Will you be all right?" Looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, past the purple sky and the twin suns, was a small blue planet where everything wanted to kill you. She had grown up on that planet. She had learned to walk on ground that could swallow you. She had learned to swim in water that was full of teeth. She had learned to sleep in darkness that hid things with claws and hunger. She had learned, above all else, to survive. "I will be fine," she said softly, "but thank you for asking." She closed the door and went back to her planning. Tomorrow, her real work would begin. Outside, the twin suns disappeared below the horizon, and the night came. It was a peaceful night, the last peaceful night for a very long time. The harassment began on her second day at the academy. Was eating breakfast in the mess hall when walked past her table. He did not look at her directly. He simply spoke loudly to his friends, making sure his voice carried across the room. "On my world," he said, "we have a creature that looks very much like humans. Small, soft, helpless. We keep them as pets. They are quite affectionate if you train them properly." His friends laughed. A few other cadets looked uncomfortable, but no one said anything. His family name hung over everything like a shadow. Continued eating. She chewed slowly, she swallowed, she did not look up. That afternoon, during physical training, stood next to her in the exercise yard. The instructor was a massive with 4 arms and skin like stone. He was explaining the day's endurance run. 15 circuits of the outer track, he said. Any cadet who cannot complete the run will receive additional training duties. Leaned toward, his crystalline body clicked softly as he moved. I heard humans need to sleep every single day. How exhausting that must be. Perhaps you should rest instead of embarrassing yourself. Looked at him, her eyes were calm and empty. Thank you for your concern, she said. I will manage. The run began, started at a steady pace, not fast, not slow, sprinted ahead with his friends, showing off his speed. After 5 circuits, he slowed down. After 10, he was breathing hard. After 12, he was struggling. Passed him on circuit 13. She was not breathing hard. She was not sweating. She looked exactly the same as she had at the start. She finished first. She also finished the additional 5 circuits that cadets could do for extra credit. Then she stood calmly and waited for the others to finish, her expression unchanged. Did not speak to her for the rest of the day, but his eyes followed her everywhere, and there was something new in them. Not respect, not yet, but something that might have been confusion. The harassment continued in other ways. Her training equipment began to malfunction. The gravity settings would change without warning, making exercises suddenly harder. Her practice weapons would jam or break at important moments. Small things, but constant. One night she returned to her quarters and found everything destroyed. Her clothes were torn, her was cracked. Her bed was flipped over. Nothing was stolen, just ruined. A message was scratched into her wall in the angular script of the language. It said, "Geo home, animal." Stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she began to clean up. She did not report the incident. She did not complain. She simply fixed what could be fixed and replaced what could not. Found her the next morning. I heard what happened, the said. Her large eyes were wet with concern. You should tell the commandant this is against all rules. No, said simply. But why? They cannot be allowed to. Because I want him to keep going. Folded a repaired uniform and placed it in her drawer. Every time he attacks me, he shows me who he is. Every time he thinks he has hurt me, he becomes more confident, more careless, more predictable. Stared at her. You are not afraid of him. No. You are planning something. Smiled that small, strange smile. I am always planning something. Weeks passed. The harassment continued, grew bolder. He made jokes about humans in every class. He spread rumors that had only been accepted because of political pressure, not ability. He convinced other cadets to avoid her, to exclude her from study groups and social events. Through it all trained. The other cadets began to notice things. During combat practice, she moved in ways that should not have been possible for her body type. She was faster than her muscles should allow. She was stronger than her size suggested. She could take hits that would have knocked out cadets twice her weight and simply keep going. One day, a cadet lost his grip on a training blade during a sparring match. The weapon flew through the air, spinning end over end directly at its face. Without thinking, she reached up and caught it. She caught it by the blade. Blood dripped from her palm. The edge had cut deep into her flesh, but her expression did not change. She did not make a sound. She simply turned and handed the weapon back to its owner. You should be more careful, she said. The cadet, a warrior from a species known for their toughness, took one look at her bloody hand and her calm eyes and felt something cold move through his chest. How? Does that not hurt? It hurts, said. She looked at her wounded hand as if it belonged to someone else. But pain is just information. It tells you that something is wrong. It does not require you to stop. She went to the medical bay, got her hand sealed, and returned to training the same day. That night visited her again. The sat on the edge of his bed and watched her do exercises in the small space of her quarters. Push-ups, sit-ups, stretches that looked more like controlled pain than movement. I have been reading about Earth, said quietly. About the things I have learned frighten me. Continued her exercises without pausing. What have you learned? That your world has a substance called water that covers most of its surface, and that this water is full of creatures that have hundreds of teeth and can swallow people whole, and that humans swim in this water for fun. Yes. That your planet has storms that can destroy entire cities, waves of heat that cook living things, winters that freeze blood solid, earthquakes that open the ground beneath your feet. Yes. That there are creatures on Earth that hunt by running after their prey for hours and hours until the prey simply collapses from exhaustion, and that humans are one of these creatures. Stopped her exercises. She looked at with those storm cloud eyes. We call it persistence hunting. We are not the fastest animals on our planet. We are not the strongest. We do not have the best claws or teeth or armor, but we can keep going when everything else has stopped. We can run farther. We can stay awake longer. We can push through pain that would kill most other species. She stood up and walked to her window. The twin suns were setting again, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. On Earth, she said softly, we have a saying. It is not the strongest that survives. It is not the fastest. It is the one that can adapt, the one that can endure, the one that refuses to die. Shivered and does not know this. No, his reflection in the window smiled that small, dangerous smile. He thinks he is hunting me. He has no idea that I am the hunter and he is the prey. Outside, the night grew dark. Somewhere in the academy was probably planning his next act of cruelty, feeling clever and powerful and safe. He would not feel safe for much longer. The annual combat trials were the most important event at the academy. For 1 week, Cadets competed against each other in tests of strength, speed, strategy, and skill. Rankings were decided. Honors were awarded. Future careers were shaped by what happened in those 7 days. Everyone had to participate. There were no exceptions. But there was something else, an old tradition. During the trials, any cadet could formally challenge any other cadet to single combat. The rules were clear. A formal challenge could not be refused. To refuse was to accept permanent shame. Most challenges were friendly competitions between equals. Some were grudge matches between rivals. And some, very rarely, were something else entirely. It was the night before the trials began. All the cadets had gathered in the great hall for the traditional opening ceremony. The commandant stood on his platform, his golden eyes moving slowly over the crowd. Behind him, the flags of 100 worlds hung from the ceiling. "Tomorrow you will be tested," El said. "You will discover what you are made of. You will learn your limits, and some of you will surpass those limits. I wish all of you honor and glory in the days ahead." He paused. "Before we conclude, tradition permits any cadet to issue a formal challenge. Is there anyone who wishes to speak?" For a moment there was silence, then stepped forward. His crystalline body caught the light and threw rainbows across the hall. He was smiling. It was not a kind smile. "I wish to issue a formal challenge," he announced. His voice rang clear and sharp, like glass breaking. He raised one arm and pointed directly at. "I challenge the representative to single combat in the arena." A murmur swept through the crowd, stood perfectly still, her face showing nothing. Continued, "I propose full contact, no protective gear, no restrictions on techniques." He paused to let his words sink in. "Let us see what Earth truly sent us." The murmur grew louder. Full contact without protective gear was technically legal, but it was almost never done. It was considered barbaric, dangerous, beneath the dignity of civilized species. The last cadet who had fought under such rules had spent 3 months in the medical bay. The commandant's scales shifted to a darker color. This was a sign of displeasure among, but the rules were the rules. He could not interfere. "Cadet Vance," he said slowly, "you have been formally challenged. Do you accept?" Every eye in the hall turned too. She was still standing in the same spot, hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on his glittering face. For a long moment she did not move or speak. Then she nodded once. "I accept." A new sound moved through the crowd. Surprise, concern, excitement. Smile grew wider. He thought he had already won. "Excellent," he said. "Tomorrow, sunset cycle, I look forward to. Choose your final meal carefully tonight." His voice was quiet, but somehow it cut through all the noise in the hall. Everyone fell silent. "What?" asked. Tilted her head slightly. "I said, choose your final meal carefully. I have heard that your species has difficulty digesting food when frightened. I would hate for you to be uncomfortable." For a heartbeat, nobody moved, then laughed, but there was something wrong with the sound, something hollow. "Is that supposed to scare me, little animal?" "No," said, "it is just advice, from one predator to another." She turned and walked out of the great hall. Her footsteps made no sound. The crowd parted silently to let her pass, and no one tried to stop her. Stood alone in the center of the room, his smile frozen on his crystalline face. The rainbows he cast suddenly looked less beautiful. They looked like warning colors. That night returned to her quarters and prepared for bed. She washed her face. She brushed her hair. She did her usual exercises. Then she lay down, closed her eyes, and went to sleep. She slept deeply and peacefully for 8 hours. This was what her body needed. This was what her species required. On her, the ability to sleep deeply and quickly was a survival trait. Those who could not rest properly did not live long. She dreamed of mountains, of her home on Earth, of her grandmother telling stories by firelight, old stories about the things that lived in the dark and the people who learned to fight them. Her grandmother had taught her many things: how to track, how to hunt, how to wait, how to strike. And one other thing, something older than words, something that ran in the blood of every human who had ever lived, a gift from ancestors who had survived impossible odds on an impossible world. Dreamed of that gift, and in her dream it woke up. Across the academy, did not sleep at all. He told himself it was excitement. He told himself it was anticipation. He told himself that tomorrow would be simple. He was larger than her, stronger than her. His body was made of crystal that could cut through armor. His species had evolved beyond the need for sleep, beyond the need for food, beyond all the weaknesses that plagued lesser creatures. He would destroy her in the arena. He would prove once and for all that we're nothing special, just animals from a harsh planet, just survivors without dignity. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Those empty eyes, that small, strange smile, and the way she had said those words, from one predator to another. What did she mean by that? He walked to his window and looked out at the night sky. The stars were cold and distant. Somewhere among them was Earth, spinning slowly in the dark, covered in oceans full of teeth and forests full of shadows. For the first time in his life, felt something he did not recognize. It was cold in his chest. It made his crystal body ache. It made his thoughts scatter like frightened birds. Much later, he would learn the word for what he felt. The word was fear. But by then, it would be far too late. The suns rose over Prime. The sky turned from purple to gold. Across the academy, cadets woke and prepared for the first day of the combat trials. In her quarters, opened her eyes and smiled. Today was going to be a good day. The arena was ancient. It had stood on Prime for over 1,000 years. Its walls were made of stone that had been imported from a dozen different worlds. Its sand was mixed with minerals that absorbed blood and energy equally. Kings had fought here. Heroes had died here. Legends had been born here. Today it was full. Word had spread through the academy like fire through dry grass. The arrogant air against the strange, soft creature from the Death Planet. Everyone wanted to watch. Cadets filled the seats. Instructors stood along the walls. Even the commandant sat in his ceremonial box, his golden eyes unreadable. The betting had already concluded, was favored at odds of 50-1. His species possessed natural weapons. His crystalline body could cut through standard armor like paper. He had won every fight he had ever been in. The human girl had no chance. That was what everyone believed. Sunset arrived. The twin suns hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. Long shadows stretched across the arena floor. The air was warm and still. A horn sounded, the gates opened. Walked out first, she was barefoot. She wore only the standard academy training uniform. No weapons, no armor, no modifications of any kind. Her dark hair was tied back in its usual simple knot. Her eyes moved slowly across the crowd, seeing everything, showing nothing. She walked to the center of the arena and waited. The second gate opened. Emerged in glory. His crystalline body had been polished until it glowed. Every edge had been sharpened to molecular precision. He had prepared himself for this moment. He had made himself into a living weapon. Light passed through him and came out in rainbows. He was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Several cadets in the audience gasped at the sight of him. He strode to the center of the arena and stood facing. Up close, the difference between them was even more obvious. He was 2 feet taller than her. His arms were longer. His body was harder. By every measure, she should have been afraid. She did not look afraid. She looked patient. "Last chance to withdraw," said. His voice echoed across the silent arena. "I promise to make it quick. Your species feels pain so intensely. It would be cruel to prolong this." Rolled her shoulders. She tilted her head from side to side, and the bones in her neck made a series of soft popping sounds. She shifted her weight forward, settling into a stance that several watching species recognized with sudden alarm. It was a predator's stance, low, balanced, ready. "Whenever you are ready," she said. The signal sounded. Attacked immediately. He surged forward with all his speed, his right arm sweeping in a wide arc that was designed to end the fight with a single blow. He was fast, faster than any opponent had faced in training. His crystalline edge caught the sunset light and became a blade of fire. Did not dodge. She stepped forward, into the attack, past the killing edge, inside his guard. Her palm struck his chest with a sound like thunder. Flew backward. His crystalline body cracked where she had hit him. He crashed into the arena wall hard enough to crater the reinforced stone. Dust and fragments of crystal exploded outward. For a moment, he was completely buried. The arena fell silent. No one moved, no one breathed. Then staggered upright. One of his primary arms hung at a wrong angle. His chest had a visible crack running through it. He looked at with an expression of pure disbelief. "How?" he whispered. "Your strength readings during training, they were nothing special." "We hold back during training," began walking toward him. Her steps were slow and deliberate. "Humans are very good at holding back. We have to be. Otherwise, we break our toys." Attacked again. It was not a planned attack. It was not elegant or skillful. It was desperate, wild. He swung both arms at her in a series of slashing strikes that should have cut her to pieces. Dismantled him. Every strike he threw was redirected. Every opening in his defense was exploited. She broke his secondary arms with precise blows. She shattered his leg crystals with low kicks. She opened cuts across his torso with strikes that should not have been able to pierce his natural armor. And through it all she talked. "On Earth," she said, ducking under a wild swing and driving her elbow into his, "we have a concept called persistence hunting." Another crack appeared in his body. He screamed in pain. "We chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. We can run for days without stopping. We heal from wounds that would kill other species." She caught his arm and twisted. The crystal shattered. "We operate through pain that would shut down your nervous system entirely." Fell to his knees. He tried to stand. He could not. His legs would not support him. Too many pieces were broken. Too much damage had been done. Circled him slowly, like a wolf circling wounded prey. "But the most dangerous thing about humans is not our endurance," she continued. "It is not our strength or our speed or our ability to ignore pain." She stopped in front of him. He looked up at her, and for the first time in his life, he understood what fear truly meant. "The most dangerous thing about humans," said softly, "is our patience." She leaned close. Her voice dropped to a whisper that the arena's microphone still captured. Every person in the audience heard what she said next. "I have been planning this since the shuttle bay. Every insult you gave me, every act of sabotage, every cruel word and cruel joke. I remembered them all. I let you think you were hunting me. I let you believe you were the predator." She smiled that small, dangerous smile. "You were never the predator here." Stared at her. His crystalline face was cracked and dull. His rainbow light had faded to almost nothing. He looked, for the first time in his life, like something that could be broken. Like something that could be destroyed. "What are you?" he whispered. Considered the question. She thought about her grandmother's stories, about the old ways, about the gift that ran in human blood, the inheritance from ancestors who had faced monsters in the dark and won. "I am what my world made me," she said. "I am a survivor of a place where everything wants to kill you. I am the result of millions of years of death and adaptation and refusal to die." She drew back her fist. "I am human." And she struck. The blow connected. His fist struck his cracked chest with all the force she had been hiding for weeks, all the strength she had kept secret, all the power her body could produce. But something else came with that strike, something older, something that had no name in any language spoken in the galaxy. Flew backward again, but this time he did not crash into the wall. This time he stopped in midair, suspended by something invisible. His crystalline body began to vibrate. The cracks in his form started to glow with a strange, cold light. The arena fell completely silent. Every person watching held their breath. Even the wind stopped blowing. Opened his mouth. He tried to speak. A broken laugh came out, high and terrible and desperate. You think this changes anything?" His voice was cracking like his body, splitting into harmonics that hurt to hear. "My family will destroy you. You will never leave this system, Ali." He stopped. Mid-word, mid-laugh, mid-threat. His eyes went wide. His crystalline form locked rigid. For one heartbeat he hung there in the air, frozen like a statue made of ice and light. Then he shattered. But he did not shatter into pieces. He shattered into something else. Into light. Into fragments that scattered across dimensions the audience could not see. He came apart at a level beyond molecular, beyond atomic, beyond anything that science could explain. There was a sound. It was like wind chimes in a hurricane. It was like glass breaking in reverse. It was like a scream that started at the end and worked its way backward to the beginning. And then there was nothing. 3 seconds, that was all it took. 3 seconds and was gone, not dead, not injured, just gone, as if he had never existed at all. All that remained was a scorch mark on the sand, and the fading echo of his unfinished threat. Stood alone in the center of the arena. Her fist was still extended from the final strike. She looked at her hand, then at the empty space where her opponent had been. Her expression shifted just slightly. For one moment she looked almost surprised. "Huh," she said quietly, "that is new." The silence stretched on. No one moved. No one spoke. The twin suns continued their slow descent toward the horizon, and their light fell on the scorch mark like a spotlight on an empty stage. The commandant was the first to recover. He rose from his ceremonial box and leaned forward, his golden eyes wide with something that might have been shock or fear or both. "Cadet Vance," his voice was strained, barely controlled. What did you do?" Lowered her arm slowly. She considered the question for a long moment. In truth, she was not entirely sure. The strike she had used was something half remembered from her grandmother's stories. Old knowledge, ancient knowledge, from a time long before humans had learned to fly between the stars, from a time when they had different names for the things that hunted them in the dark and different ways of hunting back. Her grandmother had called it the last strike, the technique you used when nothing else would work, the blow you threw when survival was no longer enough, when you needed to do more than hurt your enemy, when you needed to unmake them completely. Had never used it before. She had never needed to. She had not even been sure it would work. But it had worked. Oh, it had worked perfectly. She looked up at the commandant and let her expression return to its usual calm emptiness. "He asked for full contact," she said. "I made full contact." She turned and walked out of the arena without another word. The crowd parted silently to let her pass, and this time the silence was not confusion or pity. It was something much closer to awe. Or terror. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. Committees were formed. Scientists were consulted. Every recording of the fight was analyzed frame by frame. No one could explain what had happened. The best theory anyone could offer was spontaneous dimensional dispersion, which was a fancy way of saying they had no idea. Family demanded answers. They demanded justice. They demanded that the human be punished for murdering their heir. But there was no evidence of murder. There was no body. There were no remains. There was nothing except a scorch mark and 1,000 witnesses who had seen something impossible. In the end, the official report simply said, "Cadet was defeated in lawful combat. No rules were violated. No further action is required." The Academy never enrolled another human. Not because they were not welcome. Quite the opposite. The application requirements were simply revised. New rules were added. Psychological evaluations for any cadet expected to interact with species. Mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all students. And a new clause in the formal challenge protocols. Full contact combat with Terran cadets is prohibited without explicit written consent from the Commandant, the Union Medical Authority, and the cadets' next of kin. Graduated with highest honors, she was assigned to a deep space reconnaissance unit where she served with distinction for 30 years. She discovered new worlds. She made first contact with 17 species. She saved the lives of her more times than anyone could count. And sometimes, late at night when the ship was quiet and the stars were cold, she would sit alone in her quarters and think about that day in the arena, about what she had done, about what she had become. Her grandmother had warned her. The last strike was not just a technique, it was a door, and once you opened it, you could never close it again. Something had woken up inside her that day, something ancient, something hungry. It slept most of the time, but she could feel it watching, waiting, ready to emerge if she ever needed it again. She hoped she would never need it again. But she was glad it was there. Years later, a young journalist tracked her down and asked for an interview. The journalist wanted to know about the legendary fight, about its disappearance, about what had really happened that day. Looked at the journalist for a long moment. She was older now. Her dark hair had streaks her face had lines that spoke of years in deep space, but her eyes were the same, like storm clouds, empty and calm and patient. "I will tell you what I told everyone else," she said. "He laughed at the wrong girl." The journalist waited for more explanation, more detail, more answers. But just smiled that small, dangerous smile and said nothing else. And that, as it turned out, was all the explanation anyone would ever get. Far away, on a small blue planet covered in oceans full of teeth and forests full of shadows, the wind blew through the mountains where had grown up. It carried whispers of old stories and older powers. It carried the memory of ancestors who had survived impossible odds on an impossible world. And somewhere in that wind, if you listened very carefully, you could almost hear laughter. Not cruel laughter, not mocking laughter. Just the quiet, satisfied laughter of a species that had learned long ago that the universe was full of things that wanted to kill them, and that they could kill those things right back. The end.